There I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do prayers and we don't do buffalo speeches. We take a tough look at history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity. And we may step on a few toes along the way, but our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We will take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that is heaped upon us, and we do it all live right here from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind people that our audio streams live on our website, which is www.letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on our Facebook group page and others via Facebook Live. We take the audio and we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out as a podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. And we put the video up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. So you can view the show or listen to the show anytime you want at your own convenience. I'm the show's host and producer. I'm joined here in studio by Jake Proud, who's managing our video and our sound. And I'm joined by phone by Sogoyeta once again, who's going to help sort out some of the mess in Cayuga and what's the state of things with the blockades and the Wet'suwet'en territory and the pipeline resistance that's going on there. So first, I want to welcome you, Sogoyeta, for again. Thank you for joining me again.
Yeah, Samuel. Good to be here again.
Well, we got to, I almost nothing else dominates the, what's happening on social media or the news as far as Native people goes right now, except for this thing that happened on Saturday with Cayuga, and of course this ongoing battles over pipeline resistance and of course blockades. But first, let me address the Cayuga stuff first. So yeah, you're the one who again tried to suggest to me right off the start with doing the show on the Cayuga mess was don't let anybody try to pitch this as traditionals versus non-traditionals or non-traditionals versus traditionals, and I tried to make sure that people understood that, but that's still the theme that people are trying to promote, and guys like Joe Heath, who is the lawyer for Onondaga, who was intimately involved in this Fed rec or this BIA race to the top, he continues to push this thing. And in fact, I don't know if you're aware of this, but on Sunday there was some meeting of county legislators, and Joe Heath goes there, still claiming to represent the Cayuga chiefs. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But going in there, no Cayuga chiefs, just Joe Heath, just the white guy. The lawyer shows up there. And what he tries to do is reduce this, again, for those who don't know, the federally recognized leader, Clint Halftown, went in and bulldozed a bunch of buildings, including a store, a daycare center, an ice cream shop, and a schoolhouse / longhouse. And went in there with paramilitary police and the whole bit. And so Joe Heath is trying to pitch this, that the victims of this demolition, of this egregious act, were his clients, was the chief faction, the traditional faction. And the fact of the matter is, it's not. Because the group that Joe Heath is representing, they oppose these guys who are running the store and the daycare and all this other stuff. They had issued banishment orders, to a couple of individuals, and I mean the whole thing is just a complete debacle. But this chief group that Joe Heath represents, they were almost a non-issue. They weren't the ones running the store. In fact, they had their crack at it, and a bunch of them lined their pockets. Bought houses for themselves, and of course, here is the problem with this is the mess that is Cayuga. The mess that is Cayuga is that not only do you have a guy who gets his power from the federal government in Clint Halftown, who has also been lining his pockets and is very non-transparent, although he does send checks out to Cayugas, I guess, but. By many accounts, he is a guy who's got to go. But he also got federal recognition through Onondaga. Onondaga is the one that propped him up in the first place, and then they thought they could take him out and replace him with a bunch of a chief's council of their choosing or of their liking, because they no longer liked Clint anymore. And it turns out that half of those guys were corrupted on the take. So this is the mess that exists there. I got to make a couple corrections though about my reporting. What I was told originally was that there were federal marshals and FBI agents involved in this raid, and there wasn't. Now, don't get me wrong, the federal government and their recognition of Clint allowed him to do this, because it also allowed him to give a heads up to the local police, who were complicit. They weren't necessarily involved, but they monitored the situation. They knew what was going on. They actually sent drones in to watch what was happening there. They were complicit in this demolition, but they didn't actively participate. And that's all because of Clint's quote unquote federal recognition. But what he did go in there with were not only his quote unquote Cayuga Nation police force, which are all former police officers, state and county, all white men. But he also hired this paramilitary organization, one of these security companies, kind of like a Blackwater, or one of these these organizations that does mercenary work. And they came in full riot assault, SWAT gear, and they were the ones who basically overwhelmed anybody who may have given them any resistance, and then zip tied them, cuffed them, I guess, and handed them all over to Clint's personal police department. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that. But, as far as who the victims of this thing, and this gets a little bit tough, because the guys who were running the store were the last in a long line of people who have had a crack at this thing. And, and there may be as many as a half dozen people who had been there, taken a bunch of money, and then went on their way, or were eliminated or removed. And so the guys who were there now, while I think it's safe to suggest that they were trying to live a traditional life, it was basically them. It was, I don't know, it may have been less than 100 people. I mean, including children. Probably, maybe even half of that. I don't know what the numbers were, but they were not supporting the Clinton Halftown faction, and they were not conceding, I guess, to the so-called the ones that Joe Heath wants to call the traditionalists, because they were trying to wrestle control back of the store, although some of their guys had run it once before. So I just want to make sure that people understand. So when Joe Heath goes into this county legislature hearing and says that the victims of this were the traditional faction, the Chiefs faction, he was lying. I mean, he was flat out. He knows he was lying. And that's what he did. Now, the other thing that happened on Sunday was this organization of white people out in Syracuse who support, have undying loyalty to Oren Lyons and Company. They call them the Noon, the Neighbors of the Onondaga Nation, or something. I think that's what they're called. They all came out with signs and protested out in front of Clinton Halftown's, the other store on the other side of Cayuga Lake. So there's like a dynamic going on here, and I know that people are confused and trying to understand this. But it isn't just as simple as Clint being non-traditional and Joe Heath's group being the traditionalists, because Clint was put in by Onondaga in the first place as far as federal recognition. They're the ones who lobbied for him, but they tried to remove him and then replace him with another group. And it all comes down to this manipulation by Onondaga, something they've done before. They created the mess that still exists in Oneida, the rift between the Oneida Council of Chiefs. And there were 9 condoled Oneida chiefs when Onondaga went to bat for Ray Halperter to get federally recognized. In this situation, they had propped up Clint Halftown as the leader of the Cayugas, and then tried to clip him back. And the same thing happened with Oneida. They just were unsuccessful about it. So I think it's important that people understand that if you've been lured in or lulled in or convinced to believe that this is just, a bunch of traditionals, that are being oppressed by non-traditionals, even the whole Longhouse thing, I talked about this a little bit last week, but the Longhouse issue, I mean, we could argue whether it was even a longhouse, and here's the reason why. Because Onondaga chiefs, all right, no, take it back, not Onondaga chiefs. Sid Hill, the Tanadaho, who sits in that title, said they couldn't have a longhouse. He said that he could not sanction Cayuga to have longhouse, and so they just took it. They said, "Oh yeah, I guess we don't have our fire." So they build a building that, for all the world, looks like a longhouse. I mean, 2 stoves inside, seats along the wall, just like a longhouse. But they were resigned to calling it a schoolhouse rather than a longhouse. And of course, Clint bulldozed that too. So now it's really fashionable to say, "Oh, Clint Halftown destroyed a longhouse." Funny, they weren't calling it a longhouse until it was leveled. I called it a longhouse because, frankly, that's what it was. But and in fact, they were doing ceremonies there. I mean, they were using it to for a bit of a schoolhouse for the kids, but that still wouldn't make it not be a longhouse. But anyway, I don't know if you have anything to add on what you've been hearing on the Cayuga stuff, James. Please do.
Geez, I talked a long time here again.
No, you didn't.
No.
I did the talking. Now I'm asking you to.
Yeah, well, like I've been saying to people is that it's all messed up there, between not only the Cayugas inside fighting, but with the influence of Joe Heath and Sid Hill and whomever else is part of this with the Onondagas. It's totally messed up. And I know, like you said, that they've gone to the outside to request assistance from the outside police, the state police, and that. And they're saying that they're traditionalists, so why are they incorporating them? That's what I don't understand. And are people saying that there's traditional people there? Well, maybe there's people that want to be traditional people and follow it, and maybe they should learn to stick to their own thing of who they are. They're Cayugas. They don't take a word from Sid Hill or any Onondagas or any other people. Yeah, or their lawyer especially, or any other people that say they're longhouse or not longhouse, And that's one of the big problems, and it'll affect the kids that are there that are trying to learn their language and trying to learn, what longhouse festivals are. I don't like saying ceremonies too much because they're not ceremonies.
Yeah, it makes it sound like it's religious, not necessarily, culture. Yeah.
Yeah, just like Ahondagawajekwa, they say that's a prayer. It's not a prayer,
Yeah.
And so people don't understand that, and even our people don't seem to understand a lot of times. Everybody wants to run and start a fight there, and nobody thinks about, well, peace has to be made between those Cayuga people. They have to go in and they have to talk to each other and try to do things. And both of them are wrong because, they both ran for federal recognition. And
I think that's the important part, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, it's important people know that what Joe Heath was trying to do with this, what I call the Heath Chiefs, he was trying to get them federally recognized. Again, thought he could get, Clint Hill's recognition pulled and then prop up a new group, kind of what they were trying to do out there. So even people who, in some way or another, support this idea of Gayenera Goa or using the clans, they're put in an awkward spot because the lawyer who claims to represent them has forced all of them to step outside the circle, the proverbial circle, by entering into this BIA beauty contest.
Yep. And they don't seem to understand that. Like I said, the ones who want to be traditionalists are practicing. We're practicing with the longhouse. We're trying to do like syrup,
Yeah, the tapping tree, doing the sugar shack and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Gardening,
right.
Farming, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they may want to be it. They want to do it. So, it's up to them to do it. But, this whole thing will fight over federal recognition and who's in charge. And, it left Clinton in the position that now he's in charge and he can do what he needs to do because he's of the feeling that it was all stolen from
Well, and
Cayuga
frankly, the
people.
opposition looks more fractured than Clint's position. I mean, because there has been this again this long trail of people who've gone in, and first and foremost, with or without federal recognition, they saw a golden goose in that cigarette store, in that gas station that they had there, and there has been again half a dozen people who've walked out of there with money, and I'm not, but this by no means is some sort of endorsement to Clint Halftown, but this is what makes this a mess. I mean, and of course it leaves guys like you and me and other communities, especially Mohawk communities, who are constantly being asked to come there and help and help this side or help that side. Joe Heath's group. The one and here, Joe Heath is so anti, warrior, the Onondagas, and yet they were hiring guys to come down from Mohawk territory to defend them. Yep. I mean, it is really bizarre. And again, to those people who are concerned about, again, the Longhouse crushing Clint Halftown, the lines are not as clear as you think they are. And that's all I can tell people is, this is messy on so many different levels. And honestly, James, Sogaeta, sorry. I mean, this is why I never wanted to do the Cayuga story. It is an ugly story to even tell.
Right. And the fact is that being Ganashununwe people, Longhouse people, that we talk Skana all the time, and that's peace. We try to mention peace, and that's the situation we should take instead of going in there and starting a war, within all our other people. And the Cayugas, the Cayugas have the opportunity and their self to make their decisions as Cayuga people.
Well, and I've said this every step along the way. Before people get into this battle over who the leader is and who's the chief and who's the clan mother or all that stuff, they better understand process. And I got to tell you, between you and me, I'm not convinced that the vast majority of Cayugas want to be quote unquote Longhouse. I mean, I don't know that they want to file Gayernagoa. There's a whole bunch of them who are Christians. There's a bunch who are Mormons. I mean, some of the clans are almost predominantly occupied. If you, to the extent that clans are even identifiable as Mormons. So some of the stuff gets really awkward. I don't know that the vast majority of Cayugas want to use the Gayernagoa as the process. And frankly, it's their choice. I personally would prefer that they did. I wish they would go back and use the clan system. But I mean, maybe they want to have an election. I don't know. I mean, but that's not for you or I to decide. That's for the Cayuga people to decide, because there have been a lot of those Cayuga people over the years have been fractured. They've lived in other communities, some that are ruled by tribal councils, some that have been governed by very corrupted chiefs councils. I mean, I don't know I can't take the temperature. I honestly couldn't tell you right now if Clint Halftown had what his following looks like. I do know that one of the things that he has done is when he thought that it made sense, he'd go out and he'd send out checks to everybody, and or at least the people he considered the good Cayugas. And if they cashed those checks, he took that as a sign that they supported him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, it is quite a mess. And and look, I even saw a GoFundMe account that was set up where people are saying, "Oh, we're going to rebuild the Longhouse." I don't know, how are you going to rebuild the Longhouse in light of this political chaos that exists there? I mean, at some point, even this group that was running the store and the daycare and the sugar shack and all that other stuff, all of the stuff that they were doing, it sounded good and it looked. I went out there, I saw them, and it looked like a real decent. They were doing language stuff, but it's still existing in the midst of turmoil where they were neither supported by the so-called chiefs that Joe Heath was representing, nor were they supported by the Halftown faction. So the ones who are actually the victims of this demolition were neither the Joe Heath's traditionalists or Halftown's group. They were a group that were kind of existing within the margins. They were paying one of Heath's chiefs, Sam George, but only one. I mean, I don't know, and frankly, I don't know if money was coming out of the till to cover, to cover Joe Heath. I think they even had their own lawyer, a separate lawyer, not Joe Heath. They had different legal counsel. So I don't know. The whole thing is a mess, and I don't know until the Cayuga people step up and make some determination, however they do it, whether they have a mass gathering or whether, however they can voice what their desires are in terms of what is the system they want to follow. And then once they agree upon a process, and look, I'd lobby for the Guyana to Goa, but, once they agree upon a process, then they can get into the details about who sits in positions of representation and who doesn't.
Yeah.
So.
And I think they got to continue to not call out to people and say, well, you got to come in to help us. Because in all actuality, they have to help themselves first. They have to straighten out whether they want to get together, whether they want to talk, what they really want to do. Does Clint Halftown have something that he can assist them with, that he doesn't have it? But they all need to sit down and talk.
Yeah, it is, and it's tough because one of the things that I was going to have some Cayugas join me on the show. The problem is there's so many, people who have different agendas and look, there's the group who are the victims here. And I know some of those guys, but I've also talked to some of the guys who are claiming that they want to do everything by the clans, and they claim they have condoled chiefs, and and I know that you actually spoke with Clint, and so. I mean, I know that there are a lot of competing interests in this thing, and I'd have to do about 6 shows to cover this up, and I got to tell you, this is not my favorite topic to cover. And so, right. I mean, I wanted to give an update. I first and foremost, I wanted to correct that, what I had heard originally was that the FBI and federal marshals were involved, and I wanted to make that correction. But I also wanted to reinforce what you thought was important as well, that people don't get lulled into the sense that there's, one bad guy and one good guy, or there's one bad faction, the non-traditionals, and there's one good faction, the traditionals, because I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of what's going on there.
Right. And Clint, when I talked to Clint, when I did talk to him after this happened, I said, Clint, you're wrong in what you did. You have to understand that. And he kind of agreed with me what I was saying, and he said, well, that's the purpose I had to use. I said, well, you have to change that purpose. It depends on what you want to be. You want to be just like a regular, registered native person with the federal government, or do you want to be a Cayuga person?
Yeah, and I think the problem is that he knows that he has been wrong in all this stuff, and I don't. There's no incentive for him to correct anything. I mean, there really is no incentive, and and so I don't. I mean, there's no incentive for him to risk the power that the federal government has granted him, and that's while this thing was in turmoil, and when guys like you and I were telling people, look, you guys got to get together on process. You got to get together on process. That was the opportunity, but honestly, that opportunity has slipped away, and and again, I think Joe Heath's group is desperate. That's why they're trying to say that they're the victims of this aggression, so they can try to raise. I mean, the fact that they went to the county legislature and tried to suggest that Clint violated local code enforcement issues. I mean, the fact that they're trying to reduce this down to actionable items that the county can take on them is it's kind of pathetic, and nobody should support that. You know what I mean? I mean, nobody should support reducing our behavior to something that the counties would have some say over. I mean that's a terrible thing, and so no, I find it very, very problematic. But I'll tell you, as much as me talking about this is not. I'm not winning a whole lot of friends, especially in Cayuga territory, or those who've been involved there. I've asked somebody, please tell me the stuff that I got wrong. Tell me what I got
Uh-huh.
wrong. And even people who have been somewhat critical have said, nah, you got it mostly right. And, look, they may have other details. And I had a few people fill in some gaps that I didn't really talk about. But you know what? That's I don't want to air every bit and every piece of dirty laundry. I don't want to get into naming every single name that has been accused, because some people have been accused and maybe wrongfully accused of embezzling money and taking money. But I know an awful lot of people have been pointing fingers at each other over there, and I'm not, I don't want my show to be their public trial. Either they're going to work it out, but I'll tell you, the reason they haven't worked out is because the side that's against Clint, they've been trying to hide all of this stuff to represent themselves as a unified front against them, and that's what Joe Heath's still trying to do. And frankly, it's wrong. I mean, he's mischaracterizing the truth, and that's the bottom line. Yeah. Hey, so Gaeta, I'm going to take a break here. We're going to go off with a couple of a bit of a music break. When we come back, I want to again put this one to rest and move on to what's to me the bigger issue, and that's this fight that is going across Turtle Island in terms of the blockades and the Wet'suwet'en pipeline resistance. So that's my plan. So. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. This is John Kane with Sol Gaeta, and this is Let's Talk Native. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. I want to thank my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank Eric White in ERW Enterprises. I want to thank Grand River Enterprises. And I want to thank Cat Res Smoke Shop and Gas, new sponsor. I want to thank all of you for supporting the work that we're doing here. Look, I also want to thank those of you who share the show, who allow us to post this show on your group pages, perhaps, or your like pages or whatever. Any of you who are getting the word out, and you don't have to agree with everything I say here. Look, I know that there's while you were on, I had my phone was ringing. I know that I had some folks from Cayuga that were trying to call.
It wasn't me.
I know it wasn't you, but and look. I just don't want to have to do 6 shows on this. I mean, I really don't. And I also don't want to take a side. I mean, I looked at this, and you and I talked about this. There's enough wrong to go around for everybody there. And rather than the individuals who are involved in this conflict, the Cayuga people need to come out of the woodwork and do something. And it includes the Cayuga people in Grand River. I mean, I think those people in Oswego have to step up too, because there's probably more Cayugas or many Cayugas there as well, and some of those guys are claiming to be sitting in titles in various forms. So, look, it's a bit of a muddled mess, and I support the Cayuga people and whatever they want to do, but right now I'm seeing an awful lot of individuals who are trying to assert something here, and again, I'll update people on the status of things as it goes, but I really don't want to do 6 shows on this. I really don't. So, all right. So, back to the other issue. I got to blast Justin Trudeau. I mean, he stands up in front of the House of Commons and gives these overtures about peace and reconciliation and about patience and extending his hand and all of this other stuff. And 2 days later, that extended hand turns into him flipping the bird. I mean, him literally saying, all right, 2 days is enough. The blockade's got to stop. And then they issue a midnight deadline, specifically to Tyendinaga. And, of course, he misrepresents the whole thing. He says, well, the RCMP pulled out of Wet'suwet'en territory and the blockades didn't come down. Well, I mean, let's be clear. They didn't pull the RCMP out. They backed them down the road a little ways, but they were still a heavy presence. And you were saying that they were actually still doing patrols up to where the pipeline stuff was.
Yeah, and they still have CJL who was in there making this pipeline, so they're in there still to protect them and still to keep the Wet'suwet'en people out of there, and it's very difficult when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, comes on and makes a statement like he did and then totally changes it around. He sounds more and more like his father. His father wanted to do the white.
And he actually sounds pretty pathetic, because when he addressed at the House of Commons, Andrew Scheer got up and just insulted him, tore him up, said he sounded weak and everything. And of course, I'm not a fan of that guy. I mean, that guy hates us. But even the NDP representative. Singh gets up there and criticized Trudeau, and then 2 days later he does just about an about face. I mean, he still tries to throw some flowery language in there, but he made it sound like he did this great overture and tried to offer some olive branch, and that the Mohawks just scoffed at it, which is it's bullshit. The bottom line is this is about a pipeline. And the Wet'suwet'en people, especially the traditionals, not the band council folks. I mean, they're all for getting paid for a pipeline. But enough people who are defending the land are saying no. And this isn't just about the RCMP. If you pull the pipeline out, then the RCMP have no reason to be there. The RCMP there are specifically there to defend and protect those gas line folks. And that's the bottom line. So he makes this this bullshit claim that that he had made a gesture and that the Mohawks were just being belligerent now, and so offers this deadline, a midnight deadline. The next day, which would have been yesterday morning, they go in and they try to break up the blockade in Tyendinaga. And well, give me your assessment on what went down there.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say about the pipeline, there's actually two pipelines. There's a gas pipeline that they're trying to put through Wet'suwet'en territory, and then they're trying to run another regular pipeline, which will carry the Benjamin oil out to the coast to a refinery. That's
the tar sands oil for people who don't know, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah, and that's one of the worst oils there is, and the spills that have happened already along that corridor, are out there, and it not only destroys the environment, the fish, the water, and everything, but it destroys people.
And it's impossible to clean up.
Right. They can't clean it up. They destroy everything around it, and they say, we have environmental assessments and we're doing fine, but there's two lines that are going there, and you got people who are protecting the other line. You have the Emmanuel family, who are out there protecting that line. They live among the tiny house warriors. So that's another thing besides what's happening with Wet'suwet'en. And they're talking and working together also, but it's the same thing. The process that they're trying to go through with band councils. And band councils, like you said, are selling out. They're giving everybody the thing that, people want it, and the government, like Trudeau and all his ministers in Parliament, are talking about, all the people took the majority vote that they wanted in there. And that's not true, because if we look at band councils, regardless of where it is, the majority of people don't vote in those band council elections.
And the reason they don't vote isn't because they don't care. It's not their system. It's not their way of selecting, selecting representatives. So, and that's why they reject the system that Canada is trying to impose upon them. One thing I wanted to mention is, there's even a few of the quote unquote people who claim to be hereditary chiefs who, on one hand, claim that they were opposed to this pipeline, and then somebody got to them. They said, I see that it would be good for us economically. So even some of these other guys, and this is part of the, again, this is where the similarity to what's happening in Cayuga comes in, because you literally have people on the outside trying to influence who the leaders are and then empower certain people over other people. And these band councils really operate almost as extensions of the Canadian government. And that's problematic.
Yep. It's very hard. Even they talk about chiefs, like I've said to you before, and you've said it over, that we don't have chiefs, and I had somebody here looking on Facebook before trying to recognize who are the hereditary chiefs from out there, and did they come into our territory the right way? They were supposed to come in through the Seneca since they're coming from the west. And then he says, our hereditary chiefs. Well, that's someone that doesn't know what he's talking about, and maybe he's trying to learn everything, but still he's calling ours hereditary chiefs also.
And let's be honest. I mean, when we talk about the keepers of the Western Door and protocol and everything else, that's when clearly the Senecas were on the west and the Mohawks were on the east. But the reality is our territories have changed. I mean, we've got a large group of Haudenosaunee people who live in Oswego, who live essentially west of the Senecas. So,
right.
When we talk about where's the I mean, honestly, you want to talk about where the central fire of the Haudenosaunee is? It's probably not in Onondaga anymore if you were geographically. So, I mean, and again, I'm not saying that we've rewritten protocols, but some of those protocols that were based on not religion or ritual, but they were based on the pragmatic layout of the land and where we existed. So yeah, I heard some of that noise. Oh yeah, it was done all wrong because they went to Tandanega and then they went to Gunawaga, and it's where I haven't heard any overtures from either Tonawanda or the Seneca Nation of Indians on this thing. I saw some Senecas that went and blocked the bridge for a couple of hours, I guess, but and a few that walked down some tracks the other day. But no, I haven't heard this. Any of the so-called official Senecas, the governance talk. In fact, this has been part of the problem. Is we're trying to suggest that in order to defend your land or to defend others, we need to have permission from somebody who has authority. And when you saw my post today on Facebook, I said, look, we better understand that far more important than defending and supporting, these guys who carry this title of chief, whether it's hereditary or traditional, whether it's selected or elected, or whether it's band councils or band chiefs or grand chiefs, we should be supporting the people. And I made that statement that nobody needs permission to defend their land and people. We don't need permission from a band council or a grand chief or a hereditary chief. And shame on any of these guys who are sacrificing, who are allowing white people to turn our lands into sacrifice zones.
Right. And we're all involved, all across Turtle Island. We're the same people. We have different cultures and practices that we do, but we're the same people.
Right.
We're original people of this land. We continue to accept these names like Indigenous. We accept Aboriginal, and we accept First Nations, which is the worst thing to ever come to us, First Nations, because we weren't First Nations here. We were the only nations here.
Well, and even the word nations I find difficult. I mean, if I'm going to use an English word, most of most of it translates to the people. I mean, not to someone else's idea of what nation is or what nationhood is, and I think it's all problematic. But I don't want to run out of time, so let's talk about where the first off what took place when they went into Tandanega, and then what resulted after that.
Okay, well, when they went into Tandanega, Tandanega didn't take that 11:59 p.m. Or
deadline,
before midnight to quit. They just said, hey, we told Mark Miller that we won't take it down until the people of Wet'suwet'en tell us, okay, the RCMP are out, and they tried to make a promise. Well, the RCMP are gone. They're gone to nearby town there. But like you said, and I said before, is that they took people in there, RCMP patrolling in that road, and they still didn't allow the Wet'suwet'en people back in there, So it's a very tough situation with what's going on, and the way they always says, well, how can we solve it? And they were told, you want to solve it? Get the RCMP and the CGL out of there, it'll be solved.
Yep. Roadblocks will come down, trains will flow, all that stuff, right?
And talks will go on. They'll talk to whoever they need to talk to. They made a lot of empty promises of Carol and Bennett setting up a meeting with the premier of BC to talk to them. And those were just meaningless thoughts, you know.
Right.
And what happened in Tyndall, they went in the morning, and there was people there, you know, our Mohawk people were there, and they arrested 7 people. And I heard that 2 of them were in the hospital, you know, and I know a few that were from here in Akwesasne who were there and who went to jail. So they made that arrest, and they moved everybody else that came up. They wouldn't let them come up to the thing, and so. But there's still people going there, you know. And
and in fact, last night there was a pretty large gathering. There you have got a line of again, these were the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, not the RCMP, but they're the ones who came in and did this raid. They arrested a few people, and I think everybody who was arrested was released.
Yes.
But they so there's this line of police officers there, and all through the night, I know that our guys were playing music, they were dancing, they were doing all kinds of stuff. They stayed right there. But more importantly is, how did all the other Native communities respond?
I think a lot of the Native communities responded really well. You know, there were other people from other communities who were heading there, you know, and there's a lot of people that are there, you know, and they're just not going to push in anymore on our people.
And more importantly, many other places started blockades where there weren't blockades before. I know there's 2 in Oswego. I know in Ganawage they've been, not only did they have the one main blockade on the tracks, people were spilling out into the highways, and they were doing marches to slow down. I mean, there was some people tried to say, oh, they're blocking the Mercier Bridge again, and you know they temporarily upset traffic, but there are places all across Canada where people are doing blockades of rail, of highways, of school. I know that school kids did a walkout from school today. I mean, there've been all kinds of disruptions. So what Trudeau thought he accomplished by authorizing a raid in Tyndall turned into more blockades, and now he's got more blockades than he had before.
Right, and he's got more arrests. You know, in Toronto, they blocked the train in Toronto, and there were people that were arrested there.
Yeah, there were thousands of people I've seen showed up in Toronto over the last couple of days.
Yeah. In British Columbia, they had another train blocked out there, you know, and they made arrests there. So they're making arrests all over, and they're just making it making it wrong again. And in Tyndall, there's 2 camps. There's the A camp that they raided, and they're on down the track. There's another camp called the B camp, and apparently they're supposed to be getting ready to raid there where they are. You know.
Well, and it doesn't even matter if they open up a spot, a rail spot, because there are so many places that, you know, it goes back to the whole idea of Canada's infrastructure and how you know, how obnoxious and arrogant they were about putting some of this stuff either through our territories or near enough to our territories that all of their infrastructure is vulnerable. And you know, and I have to say this. I mean, I know there were some people, in fact, that Simon out there in Ganawage, you know, really got raked through the coals because he advocated stopping the blockades and realized, you know, by the response of his people out there, that he really shouldn't have said that. And, you know, and I've heard other people, Mike Mitchell, talking about, we need to follow the great law of peace, and peace should be the highest priority. And again, in the post that I put out today, I wanted to make people understand that Skana is not the absence of conflict. It is about what you do to maintain peace and restore peace and harmony. And I gave the example of in nature, there's always tensions in nature. There's, you know, that's why you have wind and you have rain and you have, competition for food and sunlight and water and all kinds of things that exist in nature. And there's a way that when something gets a little bit out of balance, it recovers. To me, blocking these rail lines or these highways, that's not an act of violence or a disruption of peace. It's about us trying to tip the scales back more level based on what's happening in Wet'suwet'en territory and with the RCMP. We're just trying to create enough leverage to restore the peace. And all they gotta do is pull the pipeline workers out of there. Then there's no reason for RCMP to be there, and there's no reason for us to be on the tracks.
Right, and one of the big issues right now, the big problem is in Quebec, where the judge put an injunction now on the people in Ganawage on their own lands to say they can't do this and can't do that. So the Sûreté to Quebec were gathering together. They want to go in and close it down, and the people in Ganawage hold a different thought. They're not coming into our lands,
Yeah, and so for people who don't know, the Sûreté de Quebec is what they call the SQ. These were the police officers who were at the center of the crisis in Ganazadage, what people know as the Oka crisis. These are the ones who went in paramilitary fashion, shooting up the place, and ended up causing the whole, what people call again, the Oka crisis. Really the Ganazadage stand. So, and that's what people are worried about. And again, the people in Ganawage are standing strong, and in particular, I've got to give the credit to the young people, because I mean, they are the ones who are stepping up, not just the kids who are walking out of school, and I give them props too, but some of the young people, and of course, as you and I get older, everybody seems younger,
right?
But no, some of these young guys are really showing leadership. They're showing courage, and they're also showing great discipline.
Yeah, and it's it's the young people all over.
Yeah,
young people all over are leading this thing, and there's what everybody, a lot of people call settlers. Coming from settlers, there's even a lot of them involved. A lot of young people of them involved. But you do see the difference when they make arrests with Native people. They'll just go in and make arrests as soon as they can. When it's non-Native people, they kind of back away from that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems. But I got to give, I've talked to a few people in Ganawage and asked them what's happening, what's going on, and they say, well, the injunction is there, and there's been rumors going around that there's 750 SQ who are gathering, to go in there. And the only thing I can say is, and because of Simon, the mistake he made on TV, Joe Norton, the Grand Chief of Ganawage, has made the statement that the
Grand Band Council Chief, just to be clear.
Yeah, the Band Council Chief, that the SQ cannot enforce the outside injunction in his territory.
Well, and this is part of the positive thing that comes out of this thing. I think a lot of these band councils that oftentimes had really stood in kind of opposition to what I think has been the will of the people, they're being reeled in big time. And I don't think there's a whole lot of band councils chiefs, at least within Mohawk territory, that dare to oppose these guys who are trying to defend land and people. Not in Oswego, not in Tandanega, not in Aguasasne, not in Ganawage or Ganazadage. I don't think any of them are going to take a position against what the quote unquote protesters, because it isn't just a group of protesters; it's the people.
Yep. And as well as you give credit to the young people, you got to give credit to the women, the young women who are
well, specifically. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
They're the ones standing up and taking this process, and they're bringing life back into the men to say, hey, you got to be out there with us too.
Well, and I get it. You and I have been married for a long time. We've had, not to each other. I mean, to our wives. I got to clarify that. Jake gave me a funny look when I said that. Yeah, no, but I mean, we've got wives, and our wives oftentimes, did everything they could to hold us back, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so, I mean, and I know not criticizing them for that, but what I see in a lot of these women today, they're saying, hold you back? Hell no. I'm pushing you out there. Yeah, I want you standing up on the front line. So we're seeing a change in not just the young people, but the women in particular. And they're not even just pushing us out. They're out on the front lines. They're the ones who are willing to, they'll throw a punch or throw a rock or whatever else they got to do, carry a gun if they got to. I mean, the women are tough. And again, I appreciate you mentioning them specifically. When I met young people, for some reason in my mind, I was thinking both young women and young men, but I think it's important to highlight. I mean, you look out in again all the way out into Wet'suwet'en territory. There too, it's been the women who have been the primary resistance to these pipelines. In Unistoten camp, and in Wisconsin. I mean, you can see that, and in places all over on the U.S. side and on the Canadian side, it's been women
Yeah,
stepping up.
the same thing with Blue River. You know, you got the Emmanuel sisters who are out there. You know, there's four of them that I know of right out there. You know, and there's others, but they're all the ones taking the front lines. You know, they're the ones that are out there and talking and arguing with the police forces.
Well, and that's why I say they don't need permission. They don't need permission from
Right.
not from a band council chief or even a hereditary chief. They don't need permission to defend their lands.
Right. You know, with the hereditary chiefs, they show respect that he's a hereditary chief in there. But like you said, they don't need that permission. You know, they just got to carry on what they got to carry on, you know. And you got a lot of people that are, you know, have gotten arrested in BC. And, you know, they blocked a road to the port. Although there's other roads that they go in and out of, but they've blocked the roads and, you know, they've been arrested to that, you know. And I got a young guy, which I would like to have you talk to on one of your shows. His name is Dakota Bear. He's a young rapper, you know, and he's taking a big issue and part in that. So, you know, to talk to some of these guys and bring them on exactly what's happened, I think that's another subject that, you know, you should consider that maybe one show you take that or, you know,
Sure.
Whatever, get a couple of them on there.
No, and in fact, I'd like to talk to some of the folks directly involved. I mean, it's hard because I know some of these guys are pretty dedicated to where they're at right now. But as some of the stuff, you know, subsides and people have time and they can reflect on, you know, what took place and that kind of stuff. You know, one thing I want to mention before we run out of time, I think it's important again. And you kind of alluded to it. These gas lines and these pipelines that are heading out to the West Coast. The reason that these are there, it's not to supply Canada with oil or gas. This is for export. All of this stuff that is being pulled out of the ground, all the stuff that is being, and again, tar sands oil is the dirtiest oil. It's the dirtiest oil. It's the dirtiest process. It's the largest carbon footprint. You know, to extract this stuff. It's literally mining dirty sand and then going through this terrible process of separating this goo from the from the sand, and then liquefying it, you know, with other chemicals and heat, and then pumping it out. That's why they don't even call it crude oil. They call it, like you said, bitumen. That's what they're pumping out and then jamming through these pipelines through our territories to go to the West Coast for export. So they're not even using this stuff for domestic purposes. This isn't about oil independence. This is about money. This is about Canada. This is about Canadian oil companies, about pipeline companies making money by sending this stuff to the coast so it can be sent to Asia, to China specifically. This is all about selling this resource, you know, this limited fossil fuel resource to a country that like China. I mean, and I'm not criticizing China. I mean, any more than any other country, but that's the facts. I think it's important that people realize that this isn't about energy independence. And even though people say, well, natural gas burns cleaner than coal. But if you're still leaving people addicted to a fossil fuel, for one thing, natural gas may burn cleaner than coal, but it too is a devastating process to the environment. And part of the reason is not only do they use hydrofracking to get the natural gas, but so much leaks into the atmosphere, and it is one of the most potent greenhouse gases there are. So while it may not be dirty, and you know, soot filled and carbon filled in the way that people think of, you know, oil or crude or any of that other stuff, it is one of the biggest threats to the ozone layer that's out there. So I think it's important that people understand that gas is not natural gas is not this great alternative that people think it is. It may burn cleaner than coal, but the problem is it still is, you know, if you continue to feed the addiction to fossil fuels instead of looking at alternatives, we're just creating something that's got to crash at some point.
Right, and that's where, you know, you hear people that complain about the blockades and everything that everybody is doing, you know, and they say, well, you use gas, you use this, you use that. But what they're sending out is for export. You know, they're doing that. They're doing that in the United States. They're building those lines. They built through the Lakota people, and they're still trying to build them. They're building through our people in Minnesota. They're building a line through there.
And
You
all
know,
of this
and
stuff
that
gets misrepresented because I heard somebody say, "Well, if you're going to oppose a pipeline, why don't you stop driving your car?" Well,
right.
look, almost all of us, if we had the alternative to drive an electric car, if they were more readily available, most of us would. I mean, I'd rather plug in and have the thing charged. And then it's, well, yeah, but those cars have all kinds of environmental dangers too. Look, there's nothing that is worse for the environment than burning fossil fuels. It is the
Yeah.
number one problem with attributed to climate change, and there's no question about that. So whether people are saying, well, but you're going to have a battery problem with electric cars, you're going to have that. Well, granted, I think we should all drive less, and we should have other alternatives. But the biggest problem is the burning of fossil fuels. And here's the other thing: we're not trying to tear up every pipeline that exists or shut down every refinery that exists. We're just trying to stop the expansion of new ones. That's what we're after.
Right.
So, that's the other thing that gets misrepresented. And I think it's important that look, I think, when Andrew Scheer says, well, these radical activists are just bent on destroying the Canadian economy and the Canadian oil industry. Well, at the end of the day, that would not be a terrible thing, but that's not really what our immediate objective is. We're trying to stop, the expansion of pipelines. We haven't even gotten to the place where we can talk about what we do about the old stuff that is contaminating and dirty processes. So it's a whole nother issue.
You look at the nuclear waste they have a problem with now. Now they want to bury it, but they want to bury it within Indian country.
We're facing that down here. The West Valley storage facility. It's leaching into the Cattaraugus Creek as we speak. So it's all of that. Well,
a lot of it is environment. This has got to be taken care of.
Well, we're gonna. This is a subject that we're obviously gonna stay up on the blockade issue. Hopefully, I'd love to say the next show we do, we're gonna say they pulled the CGNL guys out of there, and everything's flowing. But even if that happens, this is still an ongoing story. So you and I will stay on top of this. I appreciate you joining me here.
There's a lot to this story that's got to continue,
Absolutely. So I want to thank you again for joining me and helping me, get people to wrap their heads around what's going on. It's greatly appreciated.
Okay, then.
All right. That's Sogayeta, my close friend. We're not really married. I mean, we're to each other. We're both. Anyway, I'm not going there. Okay, that's my friend Sogayeta from Akwesasne. I want to thank him again for joining me. That's it for today. We'll be back here on Saturday, and of course, I will be doing my show in New York. I'm going to New York on Thursday, so catch Let's Talk with John Kane. And Regan DeLoggins, she'll my new co-host. Tune in. We'll Facebook live stream it, but you can also catch us on WBAI.org, and that's going to be Thursday at 3 p.m., 3 to 5 p.m. It's a 2-hour show, call-in show. Feel free to call in. We're doing an event that night as well. We're going to be showing Invasion, the film associated with the Wet'suwet'en territory. So we'll be doing a Wet'suwet'en event at the Brooklyn Commons. That's 7:30 p.m. in Brooklyn, New York. So that's at 388 Atlantic Avenue if you happen to be in the city. All right, that's all I can fit in here. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Yahweh.